So, Admiral, welcome. I hope you had a great Memorial Day. I was over at Arlington. I don't know if you were, but always think of my friends from the military, like you and Jerry, et cetera, on days when I'm over there. A lot of your friends, I'm sure, are interred and resting there. So, thank you for joining me on the day after a long weekend. Tell me what you thought about the president's rollout of Golden Dome.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. And I agree on Memorial Day, and Arlington's a beautiful place this time of year. Look, Golden Dome needed to happen. I'm glad President Trump had the vision to push this and make it one of his primary Department of Defense initiatives. Kick it off along with shipbuilding, and I appreciate the Congress putting it in the reconciliation bill. This had to happen. China and Russia have spent the last decade moving ahead of us, and their ability to conduct prompt strike with hypersonic, ballistic, and cruise missiles that could reach the U.S. homeland. And the gap isn't, do we have more than them on the offensive side? The gap is that they're developing an offensive capability, conventionally equipped offensive capability, for which we have no defense. And you should never do that when you're competing with a first mover authoritarian state like China or Russia.
No, Admiral, I tell people there is no more abroad, that the whole concept of John Adams, we should not go abroad seeking monsters to slay, no longer applies because there is no abroad. A Pearl Harbor can happen in 15 minutes. Do you agree with that?
I do. And so does every president since 9/11. If you look at every national security strategy or every national defense strategy since the September 11th attacks, we have highlighted that the defense of the homeland against these external threats is our number one priority. And it's no longer just counterterrorism or even issues on the border, although those are serious issues. We now have both cyber threats and missile defense threats that allow China, Russia, and other authoritarian states to bring the fight to the American homeland, by either through cyber or missile defense, missile attack means, destroying our critical infrastructures, our military mobility, both our national security and economic security.
Now, Kim Jong-un today declared that Golden Dome is provocative and will lead to space war. Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is it must take an extra 3 days for things to be translated into Korean, because the Chinese said the same thing 5 days ago after the president's initial announcement. So I'll say productively. And Kim Jong-un may have been caught up in the personal investigation he's leading about why his destroyer is laying on its side after the side saddle launch that failed a few days ago. But the fact that Kim Jong-un and President and Chairman Xi's apparatus are telling us we're wrong kind of validates in my mind that we're probably right. But beyond that, I know we're right, Hugh, because we need to have this system to defend our homeland.
So talk to me about degrees of complexity, comparing it to, for example, our Columbia class boomers, which we're producing. We're behind, but we're producing them. Where are we on the implementation phase of Golden Dome? How long to roll out something that might deter an enemy or make them think twice?
So I'll take that in two parts. There's a complexity issue, and there's a how long is this going to take issue. The complexity issue, look, the Columbia class is a complex undertaking, but every element of it has generally been done in a previous submarine class or has been really modeled well as they were getting ready for this decades-long modernization. So what's challenging the Columbia is our supply chain, our workforce. It's not the engineer. I do not believe it's purely engineering challenges, although there are some. This missile defense challenge is unique. We have not fought with interceptors from space. We have not built 800 to 1,000 satellite network lattice together to detect, track, and then engage adversary cruise and hypersonic missiles from space. So from my perspective, this is going to take 7 to 10 years. So probably it's on about the same timeline as Columbia to get to full operational capability. We'll get initial operational capability during President Trump's time in office. But what he described, that full operational capability to attempt to defend the whole homeland, that is not happening in the next 3.5 years. It'll happen in the next 7 to 10 years. And that will be with some great engineering work.
So, Admiral, explain for the Steelers fans, how is it supposed to work? I mean, really break it down to what are we going to be seeing happen?
Well, the first thing for a Steelers fan is you need a good quarterback. You need a good leader, and unlike the Steelers, the president found one, and that's General Mike Gutlein from the Space Force. So you need a single leader. You know what Senator Angus King, my old boss, would say is one throat to choke, and the president now has that. It's General Mike Gutlein. Pete Hegseth has that, and then that leader will work across the services, across the defense industrial base, across the new startups, and most importantly, with the Missile Defense Agency, the agency where we stuffed several hundred missile defense engineers to build an architecture, to contract with the companies to get us there. We're lucky, Hugh, in the sense that, look, people criticize Elon Musk, but I'll tell you, SpaceX has unilaterally driven down the cost of space launch 90+% over the last 20 years. That's going to make this feasible. So we have these defense industrial based companies. So to me, the big issue is you have a good leader, a good engineering plan, and then you execute that plan, to a budget.
How many different places in the United States will see dedicated space bases that are integrated into a Golden Dome system, Admiral Montgomery?
So a number. I think there's two different ways to look at this. There are going to be a lot of spaceports that support launch because we have to be launching quite a bit. Many of them exist already, but more will be built. There'll also be ports that handle what I think will be tethered aerostats or dirigibles with high quality firing quality track radars. Raytheon, the Navy's had them. Lockheed Martin has built them for the Navy already that track hypersonics. Raytheon just produced one for the Army that tracks hypersonics. We want to get them up at 20, 30, 40, 60,000 feet where they have phenomenal ranges, right? These long range radars to help us track these missiles. So you're going to see these spaceports and near spaceports developed all over the United States. Look, I think there'll also be, 3 to 5 long range detection radars, similar to what Australia has and what Canada is building. Canada will build one or two or three. We'll build 3 or 4 or 5, and that'll cover that whole northern approaches to the country where many of these cruise missiles come from.
Now, and how much of this architecture has been at least begun in Israel, and do we expect their laser technology to become part of our Golden Dome?
So they have aerostats, the Israelis. So of course, that's a U.S. company, and it was built by the U.S. Missile Defense Agency with the Israelis, and so some of that technology will come back over to us. I don't know that we're going to be importing Arrow or David Sling, their cruise missile, ballistic missile systems, because we have equivalent systems. And the problems both of those systems have, which is you're taking off from terrestrial, so the cost per launch starts in the millions. In both cases, when I compare them to say THAAD and Patriot, which also start in the millions, I think we'll be looking for space-based systems. Now, what I do love what you mentioned is directed energy. I do think directed energy or lasers will be coming. So the Iron Beam, which the U.S. funded through the last Israel supplemental that passed with the Ukraine supplemental last spring, that money from that will drive developments in Israel. There's equivalent money be going into the U.S. Army systems and the U.S. Navy systems. So from somewhere in there, we will begin to get more directed energy. The kind of energy from space is going to be slightly different. And so that technology will come over and then have to be worked. I think we'll have both kinetic effectors, that is rockets or missiles that drop out of space, in addition to eventually some kind of directed energy or microwave energy that comes from space against weapon systems.
Well, that's the last question. Does the directed energy generator, speaking in Ohio terms here, the machine, is that aloft or is that on the ground going up?
No, sir. I think the most effective systems are going to be ones that come from space. Now that there's a problem with generating power up there, we'll work through that. But if you do it from the ground, you're having to burn through a lot of pollution, a lot of atmosphere to get to the target. I still think you'll have that for last ditch defenses, and I think you're going to see the development of directed energy weapons and microwave and lasers that really help us over the next few years with our ground and naval forces.
Admiral Mark Montgomery, United States Navy, retired. Thank you for